So first of all, so we can check our sound, can you tell me your name and how did you get here today?
My name's Manuela Yates and I came here with a friend in the car.
Fantastic. So, first question, can you tell me then a little bit about, tell me about your kind of life working in ceramics. Where did you work and what did you do?
Left school at 16, quite academic but not fabulous. But at that time in the 1960s, most people went into the pots, and it was because there was somebody in the pottery industry that you knew, your mother, your father, your sister, your uncle, they got your job. And I'm certainly glad over the years that I went in the pottery industry and not sitting in an office. Because I loved the job. I loved the pottery industry, I loved the pottery people. I worked there for 45 years. Some years were better paid than others because of every job has its ups and downs, but it certainly paid my mortgage and I'm always grateful to it.
Fantastic, that was a great answer. You've answered a few of our other questions, but I'll ask them to you anyway. So where, I don't know, where did you work then? Which company did you
I first started for Wedgwood's. It was called Crown Staffordshire at the time in Fenton, but Wedgwood's took over. Wedgwood's and Dalton and Minton's took over a lot of the little pottery factories as the years went by. You were probably made redundant from one but set on at another place. But it was either Wedgwood or Dalton really that dominated the pottery industry as the 70s and 80s went by, you know, so you either worked for one or the other. So I started with Wedgwood's, but then as the years went by I was made redundant. Through no fault of her own, the factories were made redundant. And I went to Dalton then, Beswick's in Longton, and I worked there for the rest of my life.
Can you give us an idea, Ella? What kind of jobs did you do?
Again, going back to the 60s, which is what I'm picking up on, when you left school and you went in the pottery industry, you didn't go and say, oh, I'd like to be a lithographer, or I'd like to be a paintress, or I'd like to be a figure assembler. You went and whatever job was available at the time, you took and they taught you your trade. I don't think any trade was, oh, I can only do this, I can only do that. They learnt you that trade. That was what the pottery industry was. You didn't leave school an absolute fabulous painter. They learnt you your trade as you went on. I'm not saying you could do that at every factory then. That was that factory's, you know, task to show you that trade. So whatever job was vacant, you went in.
So over the years, were you taken on to be like almost like a jack of all trades, as it were?
No, I only did painting. Sometimes if people were made redundant, they did say, well, you know, your job's gone, but we can teach you how to do this job. Some job might only take 2 weeks to learn it. I'm not saying they were easy, but you could pick it up in 2 weeks. Others, they'd say, well, it's a 6 months job and we'll train you, you know. So, but I went in as a paintress. Not that I was a fabulous painter, but they taught me that trade. It did take longer to learn, but that's what I was. I was a ceramic paintress then, and I did that in Wedgwood's and in Dalton.
I should say, by the way, I've got a bit of the back end of a cough, so...
So keep it over there.
I do my best not to chat.
Have you got water? Do you want to drink water?
See there, I'll soldier on. I'm a survivor. Now, I know you say you worked for 45 years, and maybe one factory differed from another. What kind of overall, what was the working environment like?
For me personally, I loved it because I loved the big factory atmosphere. When you worked in a shop, we call it a shop, it was a shop floor. There might only be 20 on one shop floor, there could be 100, which there was in some of the places I worked, 100 people working. So every day there was something different going on. Her husband's left her and she's selling cardigans over there and there's some shoes in the market. There was always something going on. So every day, although you sat at your bench, we call them, your desk, doing your work, there was always something going on that made it interesting. I was never ever bored.
And what kind of, I'm going to ask you bluntly, as a woman, I have to excuse my phrasing, but as a woman, what were attitudes like kind of on the shop floor towards women in general?
At first, men with the more dominant sex, shall I say, you know, if we just sort of go to Dalton, figurine painters. The men only painted the faces or the eyes. They were all hand painted, and the men painted them. Sitting at their bench with the shirt and tie on, and that was it. It was a very, very classy job, you know, to paint the ladies' faces. Then as the years went on, the women said, well, we can paint, you know, so they eventually mingled in, and the men had to be brought down a little bit because the ladies were then painting the faces. After a few years, 20, 25 years, they both had to suck their thumbs because they bought lithograph prints in. None of them were painted then. They were all, lithographed. So as the years went by, the women made the way further on the pottery industry, definitely. But at first it was more male.
Do you feel, or how do you feel women had an impact then in the factory environment? Were they providing an essential role? Were they an essential?
Definitely yes. I mean, I don't know the statistics if there was more women than men on the factories. I don't know that, but there was lots of tedious jobs that men wouldn't sit and do. If I just explain, a lot of the work was piecework. Do you know what I mean when I say piecework?
Yeah, is that you have to do a number of...
Yes, you were paid for however many numbers you do. It was £1 for 10, whatever. If you could paint 100 in a day, okay. If you could only paint 50, you got less pay. And some of that was very tedious. So I'd say the women had got a bit more patience because they knew they'd got to do this X number per day, and I don't think many of the men would have done that. On the other hand, I'd say there was more jobs with the ladies doing it. But on the other hand, such as the heavy work, kiln work, carrying the bats that were extremely heavy with these big, I'm only talking about figures and small figures. But if you talk about the cups, the saucers, the teapots, the jugs, they were extremely heavy work. So just the same, I don't think I ever saw any women doing this type of work because it was extremely heavy. Perhaps some women say, well, I could have done it, but, that was really a man's job, And
did you ever feel in the course of your work that you were in any way discriminated against because of your gender?
Pay-wise, perhaps as it went on, you got more equal pay. But that come in with every industry, didn't it, But at first, men always seemed to be better paid. I will stick up for the union, though, not everybody goes for unions, but I do think that the pottery union did do quite a few good things for the women. As regards what can you say, having time off when your child was ill or things like that. Some factories are a little bit more lenient. Oh, I'm late today. I haven't clocked on. You know what I mean when I say clock on. You've got to be there for a certain time. Put the card in the clock. Oh, I'm 10 minutes late. And they'd give way a little bit because they'd say, well, I was late and Johnny wouldn't go to school and, So they're a little bit more lenient that way, but I don't think they would be that more lenient to the men. But as the years go on, as I say, things have got a lot more equal now in all industries. So.
It's interesting what you said then about the union kind of sticking up for you.
Yes.
How important was the union then in terms of women's rights on the shop?
Well, you'd got to be in the union. You'd got to be because there was always disputes on every day as regards, we've just said piecework, you were paid 10 pence per piece. But if you thought they were worth 11 pence per piece, oh no, they're not. Oh, we'll fetch the union in. And they would back you most of the time to try and get what you thought was an equal right for that piece. You never went to see a boss unless overpay prices, unless you got a union rep with you. I think they took a very strong part in the union. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I can only speak for my, type of industry that I did, the painting industry. I don't know anything else about the other parts,
That's okay. What kind of a relation? I mean, you've mentioned how much you enjoyed it. And it sounds like there was almost like a real bond between you and your fellow workers. What kind of a relationship did you have with other women working in the factory?
You'd always got a good relationship with most of the people there, even the young girls that come on. I'm saying if you were older, you mothered them. You showed them what to do and things like that. But then again, they'd have to run your errands for you. So it was a bit of, 50-50 type of thing. But yeah, there was, I'd say most of the time, there was bickering, because there was always that argument where, I keep bringing piecework up, but piecework in the pottery industry was a very important thing, because nearly everyone in the pottery industry, no matter what job you did, was piecework. So if you were piecework, what could you say? You stuck up for one another, because she'd got bad work and it was bad pay, so you know her rate would be low. So you'd say, well, she had them yesterday, so it isn't fair she's got them today. You know, and there was that type of, you stuck together a bit more. Then again, it did go the other way, and you'd got the favourites that always had the good work. But again, that just goes on. But you did really stick up for one another. Yeah, yeah.
Was it quite it was quite a supportive environment then, it sounds? It sounds as though, it had a good camaraderie, a good
Oh,
support.
definitely. As I say, at the end of my working life, 45 years after I joined, of course, I think it had lost the joyness of working. When you first started, if it was somebody's birthday, it wasn't just her birthday, it was the shop's birthday. She all had flowers and presents and cakes and what have you. Then as the time went on, you've got to say, with its different rules, with health and safety and things like this, all were brought in. And it lost that bit of fun and excitement and pleasure of working. But again, I suppose that went on everywhere, you know.
What other kind of changes you say, so 45 years, so,
Health and safety was the biggest. Health and safety.
So, I'll just ask you a question, because you'll have my horrible voice over it. Ella, what did you notice then to be the biggest changes in the industry over that 40-year period?
I've got prices, of course, again, wage prices, but health and safety had a big issue, and it's got its good and its bad. Because obviously health and safety, that years ago, again, only speaking personally, you worked in turpentine, you worked in gold, all this went on your chest, which we found out years later that that people have been ill through this type of environment. So as the years went on, they stopped all that. They took the lead out of the colour, and they did it. And then you went into painting with water. So everything was water-based, which was a good thing health-wise, but a lot of people, it took a long time to change when you've been doing turps or whatever, your environment, to change to the water-based. And that was a big change. Although it's supposed to have been for the better, quite a few people lost their jobs because of that as well, because they couldn't do the change. The same with, you couldn't drink on factories years ago, you'd take some drinking if it was somebody's birthday. You couldn't do that, which is the same in all industries now. So it is good, the changes that they brought in, but it lost that, that spirit of the factory. And I suppose that goes on for every factory, not just a pottery factory. It lost the spirit, the soul of the factory,
Fantastic. So you could take alcohol in if somebody's birthday?
Oh, years ago, yes, you could take some if somebody's birthday. I don't mean a bottle of wine. We didn't drink wine in them days. You took a can of beer, well, a bottle of beer. But, and even like years ago, again, I'm only speaking for myself, we worked in turpentine, you could smoke at the bench. So I didn't smoke, but you would have a cigarette on with the ashtray. You're working in turpentine, very, very wrong that they discovered as the years went on. Plus you'd have on your bench as you were working on, there would be all newspaper to try and keep it clean, All that went. You had to have like a bench that you could wipe over with a cloth to keep it clean. You used to sit at your bench to eat. So when you went there in the morning, your cup of tea was there, your fag was there, your work was there with and that was it. But as soon as the bell went now, and it's lunchtime, break time, you had to go to the canteen. You couldn't eat at your bench. Again, health and safety. And that caused a lot of problems because, am I going on too much?
No, brilliant.
Because I keep stressing piecework. I can't stress that enough. But, okay, so the buzzer's gone and you've got to go to the canteen for your lunch or your dinner. Now, if you're piecework, it's taken you 5 minutes, could be 10 minutes to walk to that canteen. You've only got 30 minutes lunch. So you've walked 10 minutes, You've had your lunch as fast as you can, you've got to walk 10 minutes back to start again. So your 30-minute lunch was actually 10 minutes. And this again was something that the union had to bring in and say, well, you know, they couldn't really do much about it because the law was you could not eat at your bench, you know. Radios, we used to have a radio on, you know, not a radio, they'd put a loudspeaker on and they'd play the music on a tape. Past the time of day, you were at work a long time. I mean, when you first started, it was at 9, 10 hours a day you were there. Saturday morning's compulsory as well. But that stopped, and we couldn't have radios on to do something to do with the licence. I don't know exactly what it was to the licence. So we all went into the headphones, where you've got your little radio and we'd all got headphones on. So because you've got headphones on and you're listening to the Archers or whatever, you don't know what Joey's doing down there and Margaret, and you've lost that spirit again. You know, as I say, it's very good because it's health and safety as time went on, but it did cause a lot of problems. So, go get your drink.
Experience then, and you've kind of seen the ceramic industry in Stoke-on-Trent. What kind of a contribution do you feel women play to the success of the pottery industry?
I think again it's because they did a lot of jobs that some people wouldn't do, and probably that's because when they were made redundant they had to go on these you know, these other type of jobs, screw fix, things like that, fiddly horrible jobs that they could do, because a lot of the jobs in the pottery industry were tedious and, you know, not many people wanted to do them, but women would do them, and some of it could be good pay. If you just wanted to get stuck in and you could earn some good money, you know, then it paid everybody's mortgage around here. I mean, it was terrible when it was all made redundant, you know, and factories closed, and there were factories that had gone for years, and that was all that people knew. It was friendly, whereas now it's all these, you know, big factories, station things that people have to go to, and warehouses, you know. So, and you always called your boss like Mr. John. You know, you never said, "Hi, John." You know, you did, "Oh, Mr. John's coming through." And they would come through without you knowing, and they'd know your name. No matter how many there was on that factory, he'd know your name. "Morning, got here all right today, Duck?" You know, you don't get anything like that today. And I think it's a shame for the young ones, because they don't get that now. They sit at a desk with a computer and, you know, that's it, isn't it?
You mentioned then when the factories closed, what kind of an impact?
Oh, it was terrible, terrible.
I was going to say, what kind of an impact did these kind of factories closing have on communities?
Terrible, terrible. I mean, you hear of the mining industry as well. I mean, round here you've got the mines, you've got Shelton Bar, you've got the pots, and they've all gone. So what could you do? You couldn't go home. In the 60s, 70s, you could go home and say, "I've lost my job today, they've finished me. I could go the next day and get another one." No, there was nothing to do. Most of my friends, good, hard-working people, and they had to go find jobs that they weren't really trained for. He was going to train them at 45, 48 to do a special job. You had to just go in the warehouses or care workers, something like that. I'm not knocking any of those jobs at all. But when you'd done that one job all your life, even if you were a fettler, you couldn't suddenly go and fettle down London. You know, it isn't as if you were a painter and decorator and you could do painting and decorating all over England. You could only do that one job, and as the factories went smaller and then less and less, that's it. And robots came in, of course, the factory robots, you know. And they still do a lot of pottery industry. There's still some of the factories, but it's more just prestige work, or, you know, like Emma Bridgewood's very popular and things like that, her type of wear. But I don't think it will ever be like it used to be, you know, so it was a terrible, terrible thing to happen.
Do you have that siren in the background?
A little bit, but it wasn't.
Okay. Could you? It's all right.
Yeah. When I actually finished at the Dalton factory, when I finished at Burslem, the main factory, that was devastating, because you were sitting at your bench. You knew you were going to finish on the Friday, and you were all sitting at the bench. A lot of, you know, fun going on, what have you, you know, we're finishing, blah, blah, blah. But when it actually came to finishing, on the Friday lunchtime we finished, you just put your work down and your pencils down and your cup there with half a cup of coffee in, and it was just left, and you sort of turned around and said, oh, well, what's going to happen to these? You know, it was devastating, terrible. And then everyone come out and everyone's crying. Oh, we'll all get together, we'll have a big get together, we won't lose contact. But you do lose contact, you know, you try and stay together, an odd one or two, but you do lose contact. And then every now and again you'll say, oh, do you know such a body, what's he doing? You know, oh, he hasn't got a job yet. So it was terrible, especially, I was quite lucky because it was near the end of me working life. But for the young men that have got children and families, you know, and they'd been getting good money. You know, it isn't as if they'd scaled down, they'd suddenly stopped and they couldn't get a job that was getting that X number of pounds again. So to the whole city, it was just devastating because the mines had already gone then. Shelton Bar had gone and then the pots. So what else could you do, you know? The pottery industry was a big thing round here.
It's quite interesting what you said then, and maybe something I hadn't considered, that you had women in particular with quite, you know, skilled jobs.
Yeah, yeah.
And then suddenly you don't have that job anymore, you don't have that
No.
level of income. It must have been quite a knock to people's confidence.
And again, with the pottery industry, a lot of families worked on the factories. If you just say Dalton, Beswicks, whatever, you know, it'd be the mother, the father, the daughter, the son, you know, the nephew. So all this family had lost the job, not just the dad. Oh, dad's got to try and find another job. The whole family had lost the jobs, you know. So I think that's why the potteries, the Stoke, has actually come down now. We try and lift back up. You know, we've got some good industries that are trying to lift us back up. But at the time, you know, it was devastating. Wedgwood are doing well. They're trying the best to try and pick it back up as well because they bought Dalton over, and they are doing well at their area. But again, it's more prestige, you know. So
you mentioned kind of ceramics and its future in Stoke-on-Trent. For a young lady looking at a career in ceramics potentially in Stoke, what advice would you have to her?
Again, I still think that the pottery industry is family. So if I'd got a daughter working at, I'll just say, Emma Bridgewater, and I'd got another daughter that said, what can I do, Mum? I'd say, go to Emma Bridgewater, like that. But if I'd got nobody in the industry, I wouldn't tell them to go in the industry because it's still, what bit there is left is still family. Other than that, I'd say no.
What do you miss most about working in the pottery?
Friends and all that went on, the happiness, the joy, Christmas time, doing the shops up in Christmas with decorations, and, you know, if you just work in a care home, say, you haven't got that fun there the same. That's what I miss, family and friends there.
Did you consider, when you were working and doing the painting, did you consider it to be a creative job, or was it just a job to you?
That's difficult because when I first started, as I say, whatever job was available at the time, you did. So if there happened to be a painter's job, oh, you can go be a paintress, and it took like 3-4 years to actually learn the job, and you're a fully qualified paintress. To paint ceramics, that doesn't mean I can go and paint murals, it's to paint ceramics, and I could paint anything in ceramics. But if that job was, what could you say, a fettler, then you couldn't suddenly go somewhere else and do the fettling, you know what I mean? Because every factory's got their own little bits. So it's, and if somebody was like in the 80s, where if someone come on and they wanted to do a painting job, they'd have to bring the papers in that they'd been art college and things that they'd done, and all. There was nothing like that when I started. But as the years went on, because it was going smaller and smaller, you'd got to be more qualified before you could get that job. There was a young girl that started with me in the early 70s, and she was a fantastic paintress and artist and modeller. And I think, I won't say where she works now, but they didn't pull it out of her in the 70s. It wasn't till the 90s that she was made redundant as they found out all this talent that she'd got, you know, and they took her on to another factory. Because at the time, they weren't that bothered. As long as you could do that job, that's okay. Whereas as the time went on in the 90s, we say, the late 80s, 90s, if there was any vacancies, you'd got to come with all your qualifications.
Yeah. Fantastic. So one final question for you, pleased to know no doubt. Were you proud to be part of the ceramics industry? And if
Yes.
you were proud, which you are, so why was it something that you were proud to be a part of?
Well, again, I can only speak for myself because I was a paintress, but you could, not so much now, but you could go out there and you could see things that you'd actually painted, or the shop that you worked in, the factory that you worked in. Oh, that's a Beswicks, that's a Dalton's, that's a Wedgwood's. And you knew them, and oh, did you work there? Oh, have you painted that? So it was something to be proud of, definitely, yes. And I just loved the job.
Fantastic, that's everything else. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Mind yourself when you get up, because the
Yeah.
mic's there in the case.
Yeah.